Hello, welcome back to Behind the Faders, the live sound channel. In the last video, we talked about how to mic an orchestra, and today I talk about how to mix the orchestra. Now, just to get this out of the way, you can go really crazy with mixing an orchestra. Not with EQ or dynamics or effects, it's all about either input delays or routing. For example, there is a way of measuring the distance from downstage center to each and every single desk and applies an input delay of that distance to each of your input channels. The theory behind that, probably, I never talked to anyone who really did that. The theory behind it is that if you stand in front of an orchestra, you will hear the last row later than the first row, because an orchestra stage is pretty deep. So let's say if it's 10 meters deep, then you have a delay of 30 milliseconds from the last row. And now that everything is close mic'd, everything comes out of the speakers at the same time. So then to reinstall this experience, they do all these input delays. Does it really work? I don't think so. First of all, yes, 30 milliseconds is audible as a delay, but an orchestra is not really a funk band. An orchestra is not about precise timing. So I would believe that 30 milliseconds are still well in the range of the human factor. So a musician might easily play 30 milliseconds up front or behind the beat. So, and the other thing is you don't deal with isolated signals. So there's so much spill and some instruments blow into so many different microphones that now all have different input delay that it's likely more to become a bit of a mess, really. I never heard it. I can't really judge it, but I don't think it really works. And another method is like a very clever output routing when it comes to near fills, like a bit like delta stereo. So you have certain instruments coming from certain directions. And over the last years, of course, there's immersive audio that came into the picture, like the Lisa system of L-acoustic, where you have not two line arrays, but 6 or 8, and you send different instrument groups to different line arrays. Haven't heard it yet, can't judge it. It might be the future, but I think the average way of mixing an orchestra is still the good old left and right, and it will be for a good while, I think. So, how do I approach this? First of all, I'm utilizing some subgroups and DCAs in this. My first subgroup will be violins and violas, because I don't want to EQ all those channels separately. But basically what this subgroup has is a low cut, like 160 hertz or so, and that might surprise you, a pretty severe high cut. I learned that as well from a very experienced classical sound engineer. You can high cut violins at like 5.5K. If you have the imagination of the silvery treble shine, it's not there. You'd lose nothing by doing this high cut. Quite the opposite. It helps, of course, with avoiding feedback in high frequencies. And also, sometimes before I did that, I had complaints from the audience that they could hear the turning of the pages. And you'll avoid that by a good amount as well. Try it out. If you don't believe me, just try it. Other than that, you might say, why not give violins and violas separate subgroups? They might need different EQs. Not really. And they sound different, but they don't really need different EQs. Actually, a lot of times I don't use any EQ rather than a low and a high cut. Maybe take out a little bit of the sharpness if it's there. And especially if you're still using clip mics, it will be there. So you need to take out some sharpness. But that's about all of it. Second stereo subgroup will go to the low string, so Shelley and bass. Of course, the low cut now is down at like maybe 60 hertz. Same high cut. EQ-wise, hardly anything most of the time. Then the third subgroup will be woodwinds. Now, of course, I don't EQ all the woodwinds on a subgroup, but these subgroups are there for another reason as well. I will go through the woodwinds look at high cut on the subgroup, but then I will go through them if needed. I mean, like I told you in the last video, I don't really do a sound check. So I will maybe listen to only the woodwinds with the entire orchestra playing. And if I hear a problem, I will address it. But there's not really a typical area that you always have to kind of deal with. And that's it for subgroups, because these subgroups also have the purpose of feedback hunting. So after this rehearsal, or call it sound check, whatever you will, when everybody's gone, especially when I had a feeling that I'm already on the edge of creating feedbacks, I will now bring these subgroups up in level until I really create a feedback, and then there will be a graphic EQ on all of these subgroups, and I will take out the first 1, 2, 3 frequencies that feedback, and that usually gives me enough headroom, even if I have to bring the volume up a bit during the show. Then, and one instrument I never mentioned before, the harp. That will not go onto any subgroup. I will just, that's one channel, and if it's likely to feedback, I can do some EQing on that single channel. After that comes brass. That isn't going on a subgroup because brass is not likely to feedback. They're all very loud and they're sitting way back on the stage. Of course, there's also a low and a high cut. I prepare that beforehand, of course, not while I'm mixing. Little bit of harshness maybe on the trumpets. Again, there's no rules and there's no typical EQ. Then percussion. Like I said, I will have all the kettle drums one by one. Little low cut, they don't need to go all the way down, and the typical high cut. And the overheads that cover all the rest of it, they will get a low cut. They will get no high cut really, because there's some high frequency information that might be useful when it comes to their chimes and triangle, whatever they play. By the way, no dynamics. I don't use any compression on any of this. Now, DCAs. I use a lot of DCAs, and I think if you're mixing an orchestra, you're not mixing on an X32 or something, so you will have a lot of DCAs at your disposal. So on the DCAs, I will have all the separate instrument groups. So first violin, second violin, viola, cello, bass, harp, so on and so on. And in case I have a vocal, some singer, then the last DCA will be the entire orchestra. I might not use most of these DCAs because, I mean, like I said, it's so much spill going on. So subtle movements on a DCA will not get you anywhere, but sometimes it's just helpful to have them there. And of course, there's my main 2 mics, left and right of the conductor. They don't go to any subgroup. They don't go to any DCA. I handle these on the channels because they might need a little more help with EQing, and because I use these, like I said, I use these as my kind of main mics. And that's already basically it. When it comes to reverb, it depends, but on open air, a little bit overall reverb can be helpful. Of course, you should then use an emulation of a concert hall, so hall reverb. I send mostly violins and woodwinds to it. Brass, maybe a little, no percussion. Percussions are so loud on the stage that they will blow in some mics that have reverb on them anyway. And that's pretty much it. At the end of a day, mixing classical music is fairly simple. If you have a different opinion or question, please leave it in the comment section. If you have a lot of questions, consider booking a coaching call. The email address for that is also in the video description. And you might have found a new button under these videos that says thanks, because I'm now entitled to receive super thanks. So if you feel that content is helpful for you and you learn something and it helps you become a better sound engineer, and you feel like you want to support the channel a little, this is the way to do it. So that's it for today. Bye-bye.